friends, my name is Kelly, and in this video today, I'm going to share with you how you can easily teach your students how to study for biology. I think most students end up struggling with biology mainly because there's just a lot of content and new vocab that students need to keep up with. So it's really important that they are studying outside of the classroom on their own to make sure that they are really mastering content. So if your students don't study outside of class, it can be really hard for them to do really well in biology. So I have actually started explicitly teaching how to study in my classroom. And I've seen this work with my high school biology students where they've started to become more successful once they were taught how to study. I want to share the methods and strategies that I've used or have worked in my classroom, and that way hopefully you will find the same success with your high school biology student. So let's get started. So before we get into the actual nuts and bolts of what I do to teach my students how to study, the first question is, are your students actually studying outside of class? I know for me, when I was a student, if a teacher told me to go home and study to prepare for any sort of test, quiz, anything that was upcoming, I would do it. I was a very studious student, so I knew that in order to do really well, I would need to study. And for me, studying it has changed over the years. Sometimes it was just flipping through my notes, moving through kind of college and grad school. I would find new ways of studying that really worked for me. And I've tried lots of different methods. And now I know that there's one or two methods that really work for me when I'm preparing for any sort of big assessment. So fast forward to my first year of teaching, and I was giving a test or a quiz upcoming, I would just write on my homework board, study. I'd write the word study with like 3 or 4 exclamation points to put emphasis that, hey, you need to be studying on your own to prepare for this test. So being the type of student I was, I just assumed that would be enough for my students to go home and study on their own. And boy, was I wrong. So it was crazy to me that first year because the students in front of me in class would do really well on activities, labs, assignments, but when it came time to quizzes and tests, they weren't doing as well. And I really didn't understand why, because in class it seemed like they were understanding things. And so one day I had given a test, and once I gave it back to students, I was pretty disappointed in how they performed because I thought they would do a whole lot better. So I straight up just asked the class, what'd you do to study? And pretty much crickets. Everyone just stared back at me like, what do you mean, what did we do to study? And I think I had one person say, yeah, I reread my notes. And that's when a kind of like light bulb moment happened for me that first year of teaching. Like, students don't know how to study. They've never been taught how to study. For me, I was never taught how to study. I just kind of did it and figured it out along the way. So this led me to really think about, well, as a teacher, I need to be teaching and modeling for my students the proper ways to study for any sort of assessment. And so now what I do is I explicitly teach students how to study for any sort of test, quiz in biology. All right, so here is where I want to teach you how you can teach your students how to study for biology class. So the first thing that I would suggest for you if you're trying to teach your students how to study is to model strategies. As a teacher, we're always modeling things for our students, but we should be modeling to them how they can study. So find a strategy or two, and I'll talk about how many strategies in a little bit, but take a strategy, like a common one is making a study guide, and show your students how you would go ahead and make a study guide for a particular topic. So you might take 15-20 minutes of a class period where you walk through with everybody how to make a study guide, and now they've created one on their own with you. So hopefully next time an assessment's upcoming, they saw what you did and how you made that study guide, and they should be able to do something similar on their own. So with a study guide, it has very specific features. It has some major headings. It probably has bullets. You probably color code it. Vocab might be in one color. Kind of headings might be in another color. You might include some drawings or imagery on that study guide. So you want to show them how they can do that. And that it's important not just to rewrite everything. When you make a study guide, you're organizing things, grouping things together. You might use abbreviations and shorthand. So show them, model that for them. So that way they can see how to do it, and next time they could do it on their own. So that's the first big tip I have, is make sure you're modeling explicitly how these students should be studying outside of class. The next important thing if you're teaching your students how to study is that there is no one best way for students to study. So you need to give them lots of strategies in their studying toolbox, and that way students can find a particular strategy that works well for them. So just like we differentiate a lesson, that way we are meeting the needs of all the students in our classroom, we should be doing the same for studying. So what this means is you need to probably model 4, maybe even 5 different strategies that students could pick from. And I have lots of examples of what you could do for this, but some examples again are making study guides, might be watching review videos and taking notes along with them. I also love test or quiz corrections from previous assessments. So there are lots of different strategies out there. You need to give those options to your students so that they can find a method that works best for them. Because not everyone will study the same way. Some people are more visual, and so review videos with notes would be helpful, where others need to really be actively processing information. So doing test corrections could be really beneficial to them. So you need to give those options to your students and allow them to have choice, which will also help them be more likely to participate in studying because they are picking a method that works best for them. You are not telling them this is how you have to study. The next tip for you if you are teaching your students how to study is that they need to be asking themselves, what is the best way for me to study biology? So if you give them all those options, now you've laid out 4 or 5 different strategies for them, they need to now be able to reflect on those strategies and say which one worked best for me. Because they need to equate their study habits to their performance on their assessments, tests, or quizzes. So have them either fill out a Google Form survey or a little half-sheet questionnaire where they're thinking about, what did I do to study for this assessment? And then how well did I perform? Because they may have thought they studied really well and then they performed poorly. So maybe that study method wasn't as great as they thought it was. So if they can reflect on that and realize that, then maybe moving forward they say, I got to pick a different study method. This one did not work for me. So then the next assessment, they try a new study strategy and maybe they find, wow, I did really, really well. This might be my study method. This worked really, really well for me. So students should be having, because they have that choice, they now need to reflect on what choices worked or didn't work for them so they help improve themselves moving forward. My last and most important thing that I want you to do if you're trying to teach your students how to study for biology is that make studying an assignment. And this might sound a little crazy because you're like, how am I going to grade if a student is studying? Well, the most important part of this is the studying should be an active process. Students should be creating something. So if we think of Bloom's taxonomy, as often we do as teachers, creating is at the top of Bloom's little pyramid, whereas just recalling and remembering things is near the bottom. We want our students to be doing those higher order action verbs, creating. So when your students are studying, they should be making something. They should be doing something. So for example, making a study guide, or if they watch review videos, they are taking notes with them. So no matter what study method students pick from, they should have something that they created and they could turn in. So this is where I make studying an actual assignment. So I don't grade it in the sense of, what you did, how well you did it. It's more or less a completion grade. Did you do it or did you not do it? And so in order to get my completion grade on this assignment that has a due date, which the due date would be right up until the assessment, they need to have that thing turned in. So they need to have a study guide turned in, they need to have test corrections turned in. So there's something physical that they can turn in. And the reason I make it a completion grade is I want to be able to then have data for myself, say these are all the students that are performing really poorly. There are also the students that aren't turning in their study assignment. And that's really powerful data that you can take to parents, you can take to the students, say, look, I'm doing all I can for you in class, but you do need to step up and help yourself here and be studying outside of class. Biology is a really, really hard course with a lot of content, a lot of vocab. And I hate to say it, but there's a lot of memorization. And if you're not keeping up with it outside of class, it's going to be really, really hard to be successful. It's not impossible. I don't want to say that it's impossible, but it could be really hard for students. So that is why I make it an assignment. Students are more likely to do it because there's a due date attached to it and there's a grade associated with it. One of my favorite things to do is by making it an assignment is I make it a choice board studying assignment. And so what I mean by that is I take my 4 or 5 different strategies, I put them all on one kind of table, and so I have all the options laid out, each with their own set of directions. So students will have that choice in the assignment to pick their study method, and they have the due date right in Google Classroom associated with it, and that way they know they have to turn something in. So I hope I've helped you get a little bit of insight on how you could be teaching your students how to study for biology. And I absolutely love sharing my ideas about studying, my tips and tricks. But if you really want more, I do have a free guidebook that you can download by clicking the link below. That will give you 5 specific strategies that I have used with my students to help them study for my high school biology class. So I walk you through the 5 different strategies and how you would implement them in your classroom. So if you're looking for more studying strategies, I really encourage you to download that free guidebook. And thank you for watching, and I hope you find success with your students.